Welcome to this deep dive on Google Knowledge Panels. You know those super informative boxes that pop up when you search for someone or something on Google? We're really looking to dive in today and figure out how to gain more control over what shows up in our knowledge panel, and honestly, who wouldn't? It's basically like your digital business card on Google. And we all know first impressions really matter.
Right. It's definitely that first impression.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the sources that you sent over really caught my eye. This piece by Ralf Dodler, he's a German SEO expert. He said something really interesting. He said to think of Google as like a detective building your panel.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
Oh, I love that analogy. It's a really great way to kind of visualize how the knowledge graph actually works,
Yeah.
Instead of Google just coming to you and being like, hey, give us all this information, it's actually going out there and combing through the web, pulling together all these little like digital breadcrumbs and kind of piecing together your story like a detective.
That's a little unnerving when you think about it. Right. Like Google as this digital detective, I'm suddenly super self-conscious about my online presence. But okay, so is the knowledge graph the same thing as a knowledge panel? Are we talking about two different things here?
So they're definitely connected, but not exactly the same thing. The knowledge graph is really the massive database
Mm-hmm.
where Google stores and connects information about pretty much everything. People, places, things, you name it.
It knows everything.
It really does. It's always kind of working behind the scenes, analyzing, connecting information. The knowledge panel is what you actually see. It's the public face of all that data, showcasing those kind of key insights that Google has gathered about you or your brand.
Okay, so Google's the detective, the knowledge panel is their case file on you. Got it. So where should they be looking for clues? Where do we start if we want to make sure Google is finding the right information?
Okay, so the absolute most important place, like the cornerstone of your online presence, is your identity hub. This is typically your website, and specifically your About Me or About Us page.
Okay, so where you lay out in very clear terms, who are you? What do you do? What makes you you?
So it's more than just having a website. It's having that dedicated space that acts as like the source of truth for Google's detective work. Why is that one page so important?
Okay, so think of it as your official statement to Google. You know, it sets the stage, it establishes a baseline of information that Google can then cross-reference with all these other sources. So a well-crafted identity hub, it should include your full name or your brand name, very prominently displayed, a concise but compelling description of what you do, and links to all of your official social media profiles, like all the places you want Google to look.
It's starting to sound like consistency is going to be a big theme here, like a really big theme. You are so right. Consistency is Google's love language. Seriously. Yeah. The more consistent your information is across the web, the more confident Google feels about the accuracy of its knowledge graph and the information it presents in your knowledge panel. So we're talking about keeping the same name, the same description, the same links everywhere.
Yeah.
Everything.
Like reinforcing your story with every online appearance.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just about your website. It's about making sure that your online presence is telling a unified and consistent story across all platforms. What happens if the detective, finds conflicting information? Does that totally mess things up?
It can definitely throw a wrench in the works.
Mm.
Inconsistency creates doubt. It can lead to inaccuracies in your knowledge panel. And remember, Google's detective work doesn't end at your website. It's looking at your social media profiles, business listings, Wikidata entries, even mentions in news articles.
Wow.
All those sources are contributing to the bigger picture that Google is trying to build.
So the more reputable sources that are out there that corroborate your story, the stronger your case is in Google's eyes. It's like having, a whole team of witnesses vouching for you. But is there anything that we can do to make it easier for Google to connect the dots? Because we're talking about a huge amount of information here.
Right. And there is. And this is where things get a little bit more technical. Have you ever heard of structured data?
I have, but I'm not going to lie, it sounds kind of intimidating. I'm more of a words person, not a coder.
Oh, you don't have to be a coding whiz to use structured data well. Think of it as speaking Google's language.
Okay.
Imagine, if you could attach little notes to each piece of information online that tells Google exactly what it's looking at. Like, this is my name, this is my business address, this is my latest award.
Oh.
That's essentially what structured data is doing.
Okay.
It provides Google with clear, organized information using this standardized format called schema markup.
So instead of making Google decipher our clues, we're giving them a cheat sheet. I like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Can you give us an example? Like, how would this actually work in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say you're a musician, you just released a new album. You can use schema markup to tag the information about your album, title, release date, genre, even links to where people can listen to it.
Yeah.
So it makes it super clear to Google what your content is about, and it increases the chances of that information actually showing up in your knowledge panel. Or, even better, triggering a rich result, like a carousel of your top tracks,
Yeah.
right in the search results.
That's amazing. So it's not just about controlling the information in your panel, it's about making it work harder for you.
Exactly.
But let's be realistic. Even with the best detective work, mistakes can happen. What if Google gets something wrong or misses a crucial piece of information?
You're absolutely right. Google isn't perfect.
Yeah.
And sometimes, things slip through the cracks. But that's where we can actually step in and be more proactive. Remember Google Search Console? We touched on that earlier.
Yeah. That's the free tool that lets us see how Google sees our website.
Exactly. It is a treasure trove of information. And it offers some really helpful features for managing your knowledge panel. You can use it to track how often your panel appears in searches. You can see what queries are triggering it. And you can even see if there are any errors that Google has encountered while trying to understand your content.
It sounds like we're really putting on our detective hats here and becoming, partners in crime with Google, so to speak.
Yeah.
But let's say, Google's detective, he's made a mistake. What are our options for setting the record straight?
So there are actually a few things you can do. First, you can use the Suggest and Edit feature directly on your knowledge panel. It allows you to flag inaccuracies, suggest corrections to Google.
So if Google thinks I'm like a world-renowned astrophysicist, when I'm actually, a humble baker, I can let them know and provide evidence to support my claim.
Exactly, exactly. It's like submitting a formal request for a case review. But don't stop there. Remember how we talked about the importance of consistent online presence? Well, if that incorrect information is coming from a source that you can control, like your website, your social media, go ahead and update it immediately. If it's coming from a third-party source like a Wikidata entry, try contacting them directly and requesting a correction.
This is starting to feel a lot less like a passive waiting game and more like we have, actual control over the situation. But what if Google's being stubborn and they don't want to budge? Like a detective who's convinced they've already cracked the case.
You're right. Sometimes it can feel like you're hitting a wall. But remember, patience is key. Google's algorithms are constantly evolving, and it can take some time for changes to actually be reflected. In the meantime, keep building your online presence, keep ensuring your information is consistent, and keep providing those clear signals to Google. The more you reinforce the correct information, the more likely Google is to eventually take notice and update your knowledge panel. It's like gently nudging that stubborn detective in the right direction with a mountain of irrefutable evidence.
I love that analogy. It feels good to know we can advocate for ourselves in the huge world of Google.
Absolutely. And it's not about gaming the system or trying to trick Google. It's about really taking ownership of your online narrative and presenting yourself in the best possible light.
Before we move on to the next stage of our investigation, are there any key takeaways that you want to leave our listener with?
Absolutely. So first, remember your website, specifically your About page. That's your identity hub. That's your home base for all of Google's detective work. Make sure it accurately reflects who you are and what you do. Second, consistency, consistency, consistency. Ensure your information is consistent across all of your online platforms. And finally, don't be afraid to get a little technical with structured data. Even a basic understanding of schema markup can go a long way in helping Google understand and showcase your information accurately.
Okay. Super helpful. We're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to dive into some more advanced strategies on common problems that people run into with their knowledge panels. Stay tuned, detectives. Welcome back. So we've laid some really great groundwork. We understand how Google's detective work happens and how to make it easier for them to put together like a really solid and accurate knowledge panel. But things don't always go as planned, right? What happens when Google's detective work is a little off?
Right.
When your knowledge panel is either totally MIA or it has some pretty glaring inaccuracies.
Yeah, those are definitely some of the most common frustrations that people run into. Sometimes Google's algorithms, they just don't have enough information to go on.
Right.
Or they might misinterpret those clues and end up with a bit of a skewed picture.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that Google is constantly learning and refining its understanding. But it doesn't always get it right on the first try.
So, what can you do if your knowledge panel seems to have fallen off Google's radar? Let's start with this scenario where you've done like everything right, you followed all the steps, but the panel just isn't showing up at all.
Yeah. Well, the first step is always to revisit the basics.
Okay.
Double check your identity hub, especially your about page. Make sure your name or your brand name is super clear, it's
Mhm.
prominent. Your description is concise and engaging, and that all of your links are accurate and up to date. It's like, making sure that your storefront is clean and inviting and clearly signposted before you invite customers in.
Okay, so it's back to sprucing up that identity hub. But what if, even after, you've given it a makeover, the knowledge panel is still playing hard to get?
In that case, this is where Google Search Console can really become your best friend.
Oh, yeah.
Once you've updated your website, especially those key identity pages, you can actually use Search Console to really expedite the process of getting Google's attention.
Okay.
There's a feature called URL inspection,
Okay.
and you can actually submit the updated URL directly to Google's index. It's like sending a direct message to Google saying, hey, come check out the new and improved version of me.
I like that. Direct line to Google headquarters. So we've got the missing panel covered, but what about those cases where the panel exists, but it's just flat out wrong? Google thinks you're a famous astrophysicist when you're actually an acclaimed pastry chef. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, those mix-ups can be super frustrating, but they're often totally fixable. The first step is to really channel your inner detective and try to understand where Google went wrong. So carefully examine your website, your social media profiles, your business listings, even your Wikidata entries to see if there are any inconsistencies or outdated information that could be kind of leading Google astray.
So it's like retracing Google's steps to see where they took a wrong turn.
Exactly. Once you've identified the source of the problem, then you need to actually correct it at the source.
Sure.
So update your website, contact Wikidata to amend their entry. Or if the misinformation is coming from like a news article, you might even consider reaching out to the author or the publication to request a correction.
So it's about being proactive and really taking control of that narrative wherever possible. But what happens if the inaccurate information is coming from a source that you can't control? Like an old forum post or a blog that's no longer active?
Yeah, that can be tricky, but there are still things you can do. Remember the suggest and edit feature we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Use it. Flag those inaccuracies directly to Google and provide evidence from credible sources like your website or official publications to support your claim. You can also work on building up your online presence with fresh, accurate content.
Mm.
The more you reinforce that correct information through reputable sources, the more likely Google is to eventually override the outdated or inaccurate data.
It sounds like it's all about providing Google with, like, overwhelming evidence that points to the truth. It's like a digital game of prove it.
That's a great way to put it. So now let's talk about a scenario that's maybe less about like accuracy and more about presentation.
Okay.
What happens if your knowledge panel is like technically correct, but it's missing those little details that really make it shine? Things like your social media links, awards you've won, or like a really vibrant image that truly represents you.
Right, those are like the finishing touches that really elevate a knowledge panel from basic to brilliant.
Exactly. And this is where structured data can become your secret weapon. By using, specific types of schema markup, you can essentially give Google this checklist of what to include in your knowledge panel. You can specify which social media profiles to feature, highlight recent awards or publications, even suggest specific images that best represent you or your brand.
So it's like we're moving from detective work to becoming like Google's interior decorators.
I love that.
Carefully curating how our knowledge panel is presented to the world.
Exactly. It's all about using those subtle cues and signals to shape Google's understanding and ultimately how you're perceived online.
This has been so helpful. We've covered a lot of ground, from tackling those missing panels to really like fine-tuning the presentation. Before we move on, though, are there any key takeaways you want to emphasize for our listener, especially when it comes to troubleshooting those common knowledge panel headaches?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, remember, patience and persistence are key. Google's algorithms are constantly learning and evolving, so it can take time for changes to be reflected. Don't get discouraged if you don't see results immediately. Just keep refining your online presence, keep providing that consistent and accurate information, and keep flagging any discrepancies that you encounter.
Yeah, that's great advice. We all need a little reminder to be patient in this digital age. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Yeah, so regularly check your knowledge panel for any inaccuracies or outdated information. Maybe make it a monthly habit to just review your panel and make sure it's still representing you accurately. And don't be afraid to use those tools at your disposal, like Google Search Console and the Suggest and Edit feature. Those are your allies in this quest for knowledge panel domination.
We're getting good at this detective work. But before we get too carried away with our magnifying glasses and evidence boards, let's take a quick pause and come back for the final part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring some advanced techniques that can really help you fine-tune your knowledge panel and make it work even harder for you. Stay tuned. Welcome back for the final act of our knowledge panel deep dive. So we've tackled the basics, we've learned how to troubleshoot some common problems, and now I feel like it's time to unlock those expert-level secrets. Yeah. I'm ready to go from, like, knowledge panel detective to knowledge panel mastermind.
Oh, I love that. And you're in luck because there are some really powerful yet often overlooked strategies that can take your knowledge panel optimization to a whole new level.
Okay.
We've already discussed the importance of Google Search Console.
Yeah.
Let's dig a little deeper into its capabilities.
Okay, I'm all ears. What hidden gems does Search Console hold that can help us, really boost our knowledge panel game?
So one feature that can be incredibly helpful is the URL inspection tool. Remember how we talked about submitting those updated URLs to Google?
Yeah.
Well, the URL inspection tool allows you to see exactly how Google is viewing a specific page on your website. You can check if your structured data is being read correctly. You can identify any crawl errors that might be hindering your visibility, and you can even request immediate indexing of your updated content.
So it's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at how Google perceives your website.
Yeah.
And kind of taking those proactive steps to smooth out any wrinkles.
Exactly. Now, are you ready for a truly, insider tip?
Always. Bring on the advanced tactics.
Okay, have you ever heard of a knowledge graph ID?
I don't think, though. What is that and why is it important?
So think of it as your unique fingerprint in Google's knowledge graph.
Okay.
It's this special identifier that Google uses to connect all the information about you within its massive database.
So it's like a secret code that tells Google, this is the official me, not to be confused with any other imposters out there.
Exactly. Exactly. And the great thing is you can actually find your knowledge graph ID, and you can actually use it to strengthen the connection between your website and your knowledge panel.
Okay, I am intrigued. How do we find this elusive ID?
It's actually pretty simple, especially if you already have a knowledge panel.
Yeah.
Just do a Google search for your name or your brand. Once the knowledge panel pops up, you just right-click anywhere on the panel's background and select View Page Source.
Okay.
Then you use the find function, usually Retrol plus F or CMD plus F, and you search for KMID, and you'll see a string of characters after it. That's your knowledge graph ID.
Wow. That is so much easier than I expected. Okay, so the million-dollar question. How do we put this ID to work for us?
So you can obviously include it in your website's structured data. Remember that schema markup we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Well, within the schema code for your About page, or any page that you're using as your primary identity hub, you can add a line that specifically connects that page to your knowledge graph ID. And this just reinforces the relationship between your website and your panel in Google's eyes.
So it's like flashing your badge to Google and saying, see, this is me, verified, authenticated.
Exactly, exactly. And the more clear and consistent signals that you provide, the more confidence Google has in the accuracy and the authority of your information.
Makes sense.
Now, even with all of these advanced strategies, there's one crucial piece of advice I want to leave you with. Don't fall into the trap of set it and forget it.
You're saying that knowledge panel optimization isn't a one-time task, that we need to be actively involved over time.
Absolutely. The digital landscape is constantly evolving. Google's algorithms are constantly being refined, and new information is constantly emerging.
Right.
Make it a habit to check your knowledge panel regularly, maybe once a month.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that the information is still accurate and it's up to date.
So it's about staying vigilant and adapting to the ever-changing world of Google. Are there any tools or tricks that can help us stay ahead of the game?
One simple yet really effective strategy is to set up Google alerts for your name or your brand. That way you'll be notified whenever you're mentioned online, and it allows you to catch any potential misinformation before it snowballs into a knowledge panel problem.
That's a great tip. It's like having a team of digital watchdogs monitoring your online reputation.
Exactly. It allows you to be proactive and address those issues before they have a chance to take root. Remember, your knowledge panel is such a valuable asset in your online presence. It's often the first impression people have of you or your brand, so it's really worth investing that time and effort to make it shine.
Well said. I feel like we've gone from, knowledge channel novices to seasoned pros in just a few short episodes. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to leave our listener with? Any final words of wisdom to kind of inspire them on their knowledge panel journey?
Yeah, the key takeaway here is that knowledge panel optimization isn't about trying to trick Google. It's about really taking control of your online narrative and presenting yourself authentically and effectively. And by understanding how Google thinks, by providing that clear and consistent information, and by staying actively involved in the process, you can make your knowledge panel a really powerful tool for building credibility and achieving your online goals.
I couldn't have said it better myself. This has been a truly enlightening deep dive. I hope you feel empowered to really take charge of your knowledge panel and make it a shining beacon of your online presence.
Oh, it's been my pleasure guiding you through this journey. Remember, the power is in your hands.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Google Knowledge Panels. Thanks so much for joining us, and until next time, happy optimizing.